Story 1. Husband secretly upgraded to business class and abandoned me with our 2 toddlers on a flight. So I was extremely angry and threatened divorce while staying with my sister. So this is about my husband Andrew, 32M, and me, 30F, and our kids. Our 3-year-old daughter and our 1.5-year-old son. Some background info. Andrew and I have been married for 5 years and together for almost 8 years. We met through friends and we have grown through life together. So far, everything has been great, but he has had a lot to learn in the parenting department. When our daughter was born, he was very clueless about everything, and I was the one who was doing most of the work. We did have a nanny to take care of her when both of us were away at work, but when the 2 of us were at home on the weekends and stuff, I would find myself doing most of the work because he just had no idea how to go about it and constantly said that he was nervous to take care of the baby on his own. Gradually, he did learn, but it took him some time. I don't mind that, but after that, even after our son was born recently, he had a lot of trouble getting into the groove of handling 2 kids. And because he took so much time to get used to everything, it almost felt like I was a single mother for a while. Every time that we would go out and take our kids outside with us, I was doing everything, and he was just there. We had a couple of fights about it, but I decided to forgive him for it because I couldn't use this against him, the fact that he was taking time to get used to it. But eventually, I knew that he would do a good job at being a father, or at least I hoped that he would. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, we decided to take a family vacation to Los Angeles. It's a beautiful place, and my sister Abby, 26F, just recently moved there with her husband. So I thought that I would take some time to go see her as well. We had been planning for the trip for weeks because traveling with kids was not that easy anyway. 2 days ago, we finally got to the airport, and while we were there, Andrew told me that he needed to use the washroom and left for a while. I thought he would come back soon, but almost half an hour passed, and I was getting worried, so I decided to call him and ask him where he was. When I called him, he picked up instantly and was trying to beat around the bush when I asked him why he wasn't back yet. But I told him to cut it out and then finally told me that while booking the flight tickets, he had upgraded himself to business class since he realized that he had enough points to do it. I immediately felt very betrayed and angry, and I told him that this was not cool in the slightest, but he said that he knew I wouldn't approve of it, which is why he hadn't told me. It was a very stupid thing to say, and it just made my anger even worse. I told him that he needed to come back to his family immediately. I was already very upset that he had even tried to do something like this, and now if he didn't come back, then I would just go home with the kids and he could go on the trip by himself instead of coming back. He started arguing with me and said that he had been working really hard for the family, and he deserved a break. Besides, it was not even that long of a flight, and he believed that I could handle the kids on my own for 3 hours. I tried to explain to him that it was not just about the kids. I just wanted him to be there with me because I thought this was supposed to be a family vacation, and if it didn't even start on the right foot, then what's the point of going on such a trip? I was really hurt, and I tried to get that through to him, but he was so thick, he didn't even realize how upset I was and just told me that he deserved a break and hung up. That move really pissed me off because if we are talking about people who deserve a break, I think I should be the first in line because I'm also a working parent, and in addition to that, I also take care of the household and the kids with very little help from him. Yes, he does work longer hours as compared to me, but he also gets to relax when he comes back home, which I don't. So if I'm not asking for a break away from my family, he doesn't get to do it either. I thought about going back home, but then I decided that I was going to go on the trip and make sure that I made it worth it for me. My daughter had a lot of questions about why her father was not with us, but I didn't answer any of them and just told her that once we got there, she would get all the answers herself. So we boarded the flight on our own, and after he had hung up on me, I did not speak to him at all. I'm just incredibly thankful that my kids decided to be quiet that day and fell asleep as soon as they boarded the flight. Once we landed, I did not wait for Andrew at all. I didn't even wait to grab our bags. I just booked a cab and went straight to the address that Abby had given me. I was extremely upset, and those 3 hours in the aircraft by myself had made me realize how unfair all of this was. So I went to my sister's house, and when I showed up, she was really happy to see me. But then I sat down and explained the situation to her, and she told me that I was welcome to stay with her, and I did not need to worry about anything. I had left all of my stuff behind, but I was not worried about my own things, since I did not have anything important in my bags apart from clothes and shoes, and those could be replaced easily. I was just worried about the stuff that belonged to my kids. But Abby told me that she would get it all replaced, and I didn't have to worry about any of it. After we had landed, Andrew had tried to call me several times, but I had just been ignoring him. He did not even have the address to Abby's home, so he couldn't even show up. He kept texting me asking me to answer the phone and tell me where I was. But I was very hurt, so I didn't bother. After almost 2 hours since we had landed, I finally decided to call him back. And then we finally had a conversation. He was quite panic-stricken, and he told me that for the past 2 hours, he had been waiting at the airport with all the bags that belonged to the family, but we were nowhere to be found, and he had been worried sick about what had happened to us. So I told him that I was completely safe and sound, and the kids were with me. I told him that I was at Abby's place and that I did not want to see him for the rest of the vacation. And as soon as we went back, I would file for a divorce. He sounded shocked when I said that and told me that I was overreacting and making a bigger deal out of this than I needed to. He told me to come to the hotel and we could talk things through calmly, but I was in no mood. I told him that this one incident had made me realize how unfair things had been for the past couple of years ever since our daughter had been born. I also told him that he had said that he needed a break and some time away from his family, so now he shouldn't complain about the time that he was getting since he had asked for it himself. He was very upset and tried to tell me that he hadn't mentioned it that way, and he was really sorry if I had misunderstood him, but he just meant that things had been really stressful at work since he was trying to provide for the family to the best of his abilities, and he just needed some peace and quiet. I literally laughed out loud at that point and explained to him that I had also felt these exact same things, but I had never tried to abandon my family and run away from it, and that's what he had done in spite of knowing that I was not happy about his decision. I told him that I had always been more involved with the household chores and raising our kids than he had ever been. I had actually been happy taking care of everything since I knew that we were a family, and at the end of the day we were going to stick together, but after what he had done I was not so sure anymore. He tried to claim that he had equal contribution, but that was not true in the slightest. I don't know how to explain it to you guys, but it was like I was the one who was solely responsible for everything in the household, and I would have to tell him exactly what to do, and only then would he do it. We lived in the same house, and I'm pretty sure that he was aware that certain things needed to be done, like maybe getting the groceries on time or buying things the kids needed or even things like washing the dishes or doing the laundry. It really sucked that I would have to tell him to get it done, or he just wouldn't do it on his own. I had tried to explain to him several times that he had free will. He could see that certain things needed to be done, and he did not need to wait for me to come around to tell him to do it, but he always had excuses ready. He was always too exhausted after work to notice these things, and I had always accepted that excuse, but I believe that he owed me at least a discussion before he just upgraded himself to business class and left us alone. He was also only there for the fun part with the kids on the weekends, but when it came to raising them, teaching them right from wrong and keeping them disciplined, he barely was a part of any of that, and he always got off being the good cop and the fun parent while I had to put in all the real hard work. I had these complaints against him for a long time, and I had told him about it several times, and he always promised me that he would try to be more proactive, but nothing ever changed, and I was sick of waiting for the past couple of years. I honestly started feeling like a single mother whose husband would only be around on the weekends like a fun relative and not literally the father of her children. I communicated all of this to him, and yet again he told me that he would try to change, but this time I was not buying it. After the incident at the airport, I did not trust him anymore since he had really pushed me too far this time. I had made it very clear to him that I wanted him to be with us. And in spite of that, he had just ended the phone call abruptly and left me on my own with our 2 kids. So I told him that now he could enjoy the vacation on his own, and I was going to enjoy it my way. We were already going to go our separate ways, and once we came back, I was going to make sure that we lived separately as well, so he could get all the space to himself that he required so badly. After that, I hung up, and Abby said that I did the right thing because it was very obvious that Andrew had been given several chances to change, and yet he had not. After the phone call, Andrew kept trying to call me again and even started texting me that he was really sorry and that he was going to fix the situation, but I just needed to come to the hotel and talk to him in person. He kept telling me that he was going to make things right, but he just needed a chance to speak to me, and after telling me to come to the hotel a couple of times, he told me that he could also come to meet me wherever I was. All he needed was the address to Abby's house, but right now I just don't want to see him, so I've been ignoring those messages. But a couple of hours ago, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. She and I have never had any sort of animosity, so I decided to pick her up, and both she and my father-in-law were on the phone with me. They told me that they had heard about whatever had happened from Andrew and said that they wanted to apologize to me on his behalf. I told them that it was really nice of them to do so, but this was between me and Andrew. They did not need to feel bad for any of this. However, they not only contacted me for this reason but also because they had heard from Andrew that I was apparently thinking about filing for a divorce, and they just wanted to request me not to do that because then it would make it very difficult for them to see the kids as regularly as they did. I tried to reassure them that I was not going to restrict our children from being able to see them. Truth be told, I haven't even thought about whether I'm going to file for full custody or not. It's very scary, and at the moment, I'm not sure what I want to do, to be honest. Anyway, I tried to explain to them that things were going to be fine, but they were very panicky and kept begging me to go back to Andrew and said that I should give him a chance. They said that we have been together for almost 8 years, and things have only hit a rough patch, but just because of that, I shouldn't think about leaving him so soon. I was sure about what to do before that phone call, but now after getting off the phone with his parents, I feel weird. Andrew has still been texting me and keeps telling me to talk to him and says that he knows that we can work things out because we have been together for almost a decade and have been through much worse situations, so we will definitely be able to work this out as well. I feel like I might actually have overreacted since I can see that all of them are trying really hard to get me to go back to him, but I also feel that what he did at the airport was not fair at all. So I'm going to go ahead and post this because I'm still angry about the fact that I was left alone with our 2 kids right before a family vacation. Date 1. Hi, so 3 days have passed since I landed in LA, and I have been living with Abby and her husband. They have been kind enough to open up their home to me and have been there for me in this difficult time. I've been sharing clothes with Abby, and the kids got some new clothes for themselves. However, we can finally go back to wearing our own clothes now because earlier today I finally met with Andrew, and he brought along our bags with him. Last night, after a lot of deliberation and a discussion with Abby and her husband, I finally decided to respond to Andrew. I gave him the address and that was it. I did not say anything else. I figured that if he wanted to show up, he would come on his own and would not require me to say anything else. Besides, after all that had happened, I felt really awkward. This morning he showed up with the bags and everything, and when he came, Abby and her husband decided to take the kids and go into a separate room. The kids were quite happy to see him since they had been asking about him a lot. There was a lot of hugging and screaming, and I instantly knew that even if I did file for a divorce, I would never be able to get myself to file for full custody as well because of everything. They seemed to be very happy around their father, and he was just as happy to be around his kids. Anyway, once the kids were in a separate room, we finally got to talking. It was awkward, but he told me that he was really sorry from the bottom of his heart for not being a better father and a better husband. He said that he hadn't even thought that any of this was a big deal, but he hadn't exactly been thinking about how I felt and had just been thinking about his own self, and it was really incredibly selfish of him. He finally told me that he really appreciated everything that I had done for the family and how hard I continued to push myself all the time just to keep everybody happy. I told him that these were nice things to hear, but I needed real and tangible change, and I had given him several chances to do so, but he never took any of it seriously, and that was why we were in the situation today. I told him that what had happened at the airport had really hurt me, and maybe I had overreacted a bit, but honestly, everything just kept piling on, and I couldn't deal with any of this anymore. I thought that he was going to get defensive again, but to my surprise, he came to me, got onto his knees and took my hands in his own. That was when I realized that I still loved him, no matter how he behaved with me, because the way that I felt when he did that made me feel like I was safe, and nothing bad could ever happen to me. I started crying while he was on his knees, and he told me that he was really sorry and that he knew he needed to step up and be there for his family. He also went on to explain that so far, he had made his work his life, and every day that he would come back home, he would just be so drained and worried about the future since he believed that whatever he was making was not enough, so much so that he couldn't even bring himself to think about anything else. He even said that he had been taking anxiety medication for the past couple of months because of how stressed out he had been. I didn't know that, and he said that he didn't tell me because he didn't want me to worry about these things. He said that he had fallen asleep at the wheel and he was ashamed of it, but he just wanted one chance to make it work with me, and he promised me that he would make it worth it and I would not regret it. I was still crying while he was saying all of this, So he wiped my tears and sat beside me, and just like all times, I put my head on his shoulder, and we just sat there like that for a couple of minutes. And I know this might not be the decision a lot of people will agree with, but I decided that I was going to stay with him. I really didn't care about what other people would say because I love him so much. I don't think I can ever love anybody that way, but I also love my children, and I wanted the best for them, so I told him that I needed some time to think about things right now, and he told me that I could have all the time that I needed. So after that, we hugged, and he went back to the hotel. I have discussed things with Abby, and she told me that she has no advice for me. She just thinks that I'm a good wife and an even better mother, so she knows that I will do what's right for the family. I thought about things from Andrew's perspective after the conversation that we had today, and I guess it can't be easy to be in a position like that because while we both work, he definitely has always been more stressed about his work than I have ever been. He comes from a family where he has had to face extremely tough situations since his father lost his job and was struggling for a good couple of years when he was younger, so he knows what it means to struggle for money, and I guess that explains why he had been so focused on his work and nothing else. It's not an excuse, I know, but it is what it is. Also, the fact that he had been so stressed out for so long and hadn't even told me about it because he didn't want me to worry, it just makes me realize that we have just had a lapse in communication, and if we can fix that, maybe we can move past this. So now I'm going to think about it for a while, and then let's see what happens. Update 2. Hi, so it's been a couple of days since my last update. 2 days after that conversation with Andrew, I decided to go live with him in the hotel that we had booked. I finally got out of Abby's hair with my kids. I thanked her for letting me stay with her and being there for me. She and her husband even dropped me off at the hotel, and since then we had been staying together. We figured that our fight was leading to the kids getting disappointed since we had promised them a fun vacation, and now we were staying separately, and they barely got to do anything fun. So we are doing everything that we had planned we would do, and the kids seem to be much happier now that we are together. I still have a lot of unresolved issues, but for the sake of the children, we are trying to keep all of that aside and just be there for each other as a family. I think that's the most important part of our lives right now. Being there for our children and making sure that they are happy. He was right. We have been through much worse situations, so I think we can make it through this as well. When I came back to the hotel with the kids, I told him that I was not considering getting a divorce right now, but we still had a lot of things to work through. However, as soon as I told him that I was not thinking about divorce anymore, he was so happy that he literally hugged me, lifted me in the air, and did a full twirl. I don't even think he heard the last part, and I didn't have the heart to repeat it because I was laughing so hard. Anyway, he keeps saying sorry every morning and has been doing his very best to make up for everything. I'm literally being treated like a princess right now, and I can't say that I have any complaints about his behavior at the moment. If things continue at this rate, I might even forgive him a lot earlier than I had planned. Update 3. Hi, so this update is particularly to address something that people have been saying. I've been receiving a constant stream of comments from a particularly hateful section saying that I'm a terrible mother and that I'm an idiot for getting back together with Andrew. I can understand that some people might not agree with my decision to get back together with him, but only I know that Andrew and I have been together for a really long time. We have had our fair share of issues, and what he did recently was not right, but if he is willing to work on it, then I want to give him a chance. I want to fight for our marriage, and I don't think that there is anything wrong with it. Lots of women do it, and for some of them, things actually turn out to be great, and I want to believe that I'm one of those women because Andrew has started changing right after we had that discussion. If he goes back to his usual self, then I know what to do, but as of now, I want to keep our marriage intact, and I really don't think there's anything wrong with wanting that for myself. The constant barrage of hate that I've been receiving is breaking my heart. Lots of people have even been accusing me of being selfish for getting together with him, even though he's not a good father. I personally don't agree with that. I think he's a good father and he's trying to be better, so that's what really counts. Anyway, we are almost at the end of our vacation right now, and things have been going incredibly well for both of us, so I had to break it to you guys, but all of you were wrong. Once we get back home, we are going to start couples counseling, and I know for a fact that it's going to help us. The only reason I'm even posting updates right now is for the well-wishers because quite a lot of you have been invested in my story, and I wanted to know more. So if some people really think that I'm not meant to be with him, then you guys are free to not read any updates on this post. But please just keep your hateful comments to yourself because it's not worth it. Andrew and I are really happy together, and our kids are better off for it. Ultimately, we know what's best for our family, and I think people should really respect that. So if you're rooting for us to break up, I'm sorry to inform you, but that's not going to happen. Update for Hi everyone. Wow, it's been quite some time since I came on Reddit. My last post was pretty intense. I guess it was not a real update. It was mostly just a rant about the hate I'd been receiving, but I'm happy to tell you guys that Andrew and I are still together. It has been 7 months since our vacation, and after we returned, we started looking for counselors near us and have been in couples counseling for the past couple of months. It's been going really well for us, and Andrew has been cutting back on his hours at work as well. He is more involved in the household now and takes care of the kids like never before, and now it's not just the fun part that he's there for. He's there for them at all times whenever he is at home. He doesn't bring the office back home with him anymore, and I'm really glad about that. It also really feels like we've been able to find each other after a really long time. We have ramped up the date nights and are trying to reignite the spark because while we were on vacation, we realized that we really did love each other. But things have just been so hectic and intense for the past couple of years that we had forgotten to show each other the love that we felt. So we get our parents to babysit the children while we go out a couple of nights every month because we really need it. There's more to life than just working, kids, and I guess that was part of the reason why things were going so awry. Anyway, we have been actively working on our marriage, and Andrew has never been a better husband or a father. Most importantly, the kids are happier than ever, and that's really what both of us honestly wanted. They are thrilled to have their father around more, and whenever I look at them, I feel like I made the right choice by sticking to him. Money is going to come and go, but ultimately we are all that we have. I think he had been a little too stressed about the future, but in a couple of weeks we are going to take another road trip. This time it's going to be much better. Our kids are quite excited about it, and we are going to make sure that this time, everything is perfect. And you know what? Even if it's not, we want to find a way to deal with it like a family because if the past couple of months have taught us anything, it is that we can do whatever we set our mind to as long as we have each other. And I know that it sounds like something straight out of a corny film, but it's true. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My daughter-in-law starts to get too cozy with me when my son isn't around, but soon things get ugly, and I have to make a decision. I am a 62-year-old widower. My wife passed away 5 years ago, shortly before our son, John, 32, got married to Brittany, 30. After their wedding, John and Brittany moved in with me, saying it was temporary until they found their own place. That was 4 years ago. I'm well off financially due to smart investments and a successful business I sold before retiring. Since John and Britt moved in, they've been living entirely off my wealth. I pay for everything: groceries, utilities, their car payments, and even their personal expenses like clothes and entertainment. At first, I didn't mind. I thought they needed time to settle into married life and find their footing. But as months turned into years, I started to feel taken advantage of. There were several incidents that bothered me. Last year, John asked for $10,000 to invest in cryptocurrency. I trusted him and gave him the money, only to later discover he had used it for a lavish vacation with Brittany. They went to Bali for 2 weeks, staying in a 5-star resort and posting endless photos on social media. It hurt to realize they had lied to me. Brittany's shopping habits also became a point of concern. She often goes on shopping sprees, buying designer clothes and accessories. Just last month, she came home with 3 new Louis Vuitton bags and a pair of Christian Louboutin shoes. When I casually asked about the cost, she brushed it off, saying it was a treat for herself. She never offers to contribute to household expenses. They've also developed a habit of throwing parties at my house, inviting their friends over and using my wine cellar without asking. Last New Year's Eve, they hosted a party for about 50 people. They didn't even bother to inform me beforehand. I came home from a quiet dinner with a friend to find my house packed with strangers and my prized wine collection significantly depleted. John quit his job 2 years ago to pursue his passion for painting. He converted our garage into a studio and spends hours there every day. However, he hasn't sold a single piece yet. When I gently suggested he might consider part-time work to support his art, He got defensive and accused me of not believing in his talent. Recently, they asked me to co-sign a loan for a new sports car. When I refused, explaining that it wasn't a wise financial decision, they got upset. Brittany didn't speak to me for days, and John kept making passive-aggressive comments about how I don't support their dreams. Despite these issues, I never said anything. I didn't want to create conflict or risk damaging my relationship with my only child. But last month, I decided enough was enough. I called John into my study and told him I couldn't support them financially anymore. I explained that at 32, he needed to take responsibility for his own life and find a job. I said I'd give them 3 months to get their finances in order before I stopped covering their expenses. John was shocked but seemed to understand. He apologized for relying on me for so long and promised to start looking for work immediately. I felt relieved after our talk, thinking the issue was resolved. However, things took an unexpected turn after that conversation. Brittany's behavior towards me changed dramatically. She became overly attentive and started spending a lot of time around me. She began making me breakfast every morning, something she'd never done before. At first, I thought it was a nice gesture, but it quickly became uncomfortable. She'd linger in the kitchen, asking personal questions about my day and my plans. One evening, after I mentioned having a stiff neck, she offered to give me a massage. I politely declined, but she insisted, saying her father had taught her great techniques. The way she looked at me made me feel uneasy. During our family movie nights, Brittany started sitting next to me on the couch instead of with John. She would often lean against me, claiming she was cold or tired. It made me incredibly uncomfortable, especially when John was right there in the room. Her compliments became frequent and somewhat inappropriate. She'd tell me I looked handsome or that I must have been quite the catch when I was younger. Once, she even said I was in great shape for my age and asked about my workout routine, her eyes lingering a bit too long. Perhaps most disturbingly, Brittany began walking around the house in more revealing clothing than usual. She'd come downstairs for breakfast in short nightgowns or tight yoga pants, things she never used to wear around me. Meanwhile, John was out most days, allegedly job hunting. This left me alone with Brittany for long stretches, which made me increasingly uncomfortable. I'm not used to this kind of attention, especially from my daughter-in-law. It feels inappropriate and makes me uneasy. Last week, I was in the kitchen making coffee when Brittany came in wearing just a towel. She claimed she forgot her robe in the laundry room and asked if I could get it for her. The way she held the towel, barely covering herself, seemed deliberate. I awkwardly declined and quickly left the kitchen, my heart racing. A few days ago, she asked me to help her unclog the shower drain. When I went to the bathroom, she was in there wearing a very skimpy bathrobe. She stood unnecessarily close to me as I worked on the drain, her perfume overwhelming in the small space. Yesterday, during dinner, she spilled wine on her shirt. Instead of going to change, she took off her shirt right there at the table, leaving her in just a bra. She asked if I had any stain removal tips, but her eyes seemed to be challenging me, watching for my reaction. I mumbled something about club soda and excused myself from the table. This morning, she came into my room without knocking while I was getting dressed. I was standing there in just my underwear, and she didn't immediately leave. She apologized but lingered, her eyes roaming over me in a way that made my skin crawl. I'm starting to feel like something is wrong. Brittany's behavior seems calculated, and I'm worried she might have ulterior motives. I've started being more careful around her. I make sure to lock my bedroom door at night and avoid being alone with her in closed spaces like the kitchen or living room. I've started taking my meals in my study instead of the dining room to minimize our interaction. I've also started making excuses to leave the house when John is out, so I'm not alone with Brittany. I've taken up golf again, joined a book club, and started volunteering at the local animal shelter. Anything to keep me out of the house during the day. As a precaution, I've hidden my financial documents and changed the passwords on my accounts. I hate that I feel the need to do this, but Brittany's sudden interest in my daily routine and finances has made me paranoid. I haven't mentioned any of this to John. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if Brittany is genuinely trying to manipulate me somehow. Part of me wonders if this is some misguided attempt to ensure I keep supporting them financially. I'm at a loss for what to do. I don't want to accuse Brittany of anything without proof, but I also don't want to continue feeling uncomfortable in my own home. I'm considering asking them to move out sooner than the 3-month deadline I initially gave them. Should I talk to John about Brittany's behavior? Or am I just an old man misinterpreting a young woman's friendliness? I need some outside perspective on this. Thanks for reading. Update. Hello everyone. I wanted to provide an update on my situation. Things came to a head last night, and I felt I needed to share what happened. As I mentioned in my previous post, Brittany's behavior had been making me increasingly uncomfortable. Last night, things escalated to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. John was out late attending a job fair in the city. Brittany suggested we watch a movie together while we waited for him to return. I hesitated at first, not wanting to be alone with her, but I also didn't want to seem rude or paranoid, so I agreed. We settled in the living room to watch an old classic film. At first, everything seemed normal. Brittany sat on the opposite end of the couch and I felt relieved. Maybe I had been overreacting after all, I thought. About halfway through the movie, Brittany got up to get a blanket. When she returned, instead of going back to her original spot, she sat right next to me. I tensed up but tried to focus on the movie. As time passed, Brittany inched closer to me. I could feel the warmth of her body next to mine, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. I shifted away slightly, hoping she'd get the hint, but she didn't. Then, during a particularly emotional scene in the movie, Brittany suddenly leaned her head on my shoulder. I froze, not knowing how to react. My heart started racing, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Before I could say anything, Brittany took my hand in hers. She intertwined our fingers and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. That was the final straw for me. I abruptly stood up, almost causing Brittany to fall over on the couch. I mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom and quickly left the room. Once in the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and tried to calm down. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing a confused and troubled old man looking back at me. I knew I couldn't go on like this. The situation had gone too far, and I needed to address it head-on. After a few minutes of gathering my thoughts and courage, I decided to confront Brittany about her behavior. I walked back to the living room, where Brittany was still sitting on the couch. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it concern, or something else? I took a deep breath and asked Brittany if we could talk. She nodded, patting the spot next to her on the couch. I shook my head and remained standing, needing to maintain some physical distance between us. I started by telling Brittany that I had noticed a change in her behavior towards me recently. I mentioned that while I appreciated her attempts to be kind, some of her actions had made me feel uncomfortable. Brittany's face changed as I spoke. The smile she had been wearing faded, replaced by a frown. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, asking her to let me finish. I explained that as her father-in-law, I cared for her, but only in a familiar way. I told her that some of her recent actions, the revealing clothing, the unnecessary physical contact, and tonight's hand-holding, were inappropriate given our relationship. I made it clear that I wasn't accusing her of anything specific, but I needed her to understand that this behavior had to stop. I asked her to maintain appropriate boundaries and treat me as she would any other older family member. As I spoke, I saw various emotions flicker across Brittany's face. Surprise, confusion, and then what looked like anger. When I finished, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. After what felt like an eternity, Brittany finally spoke. Her voice was cold and hard, nothing like the overly sweet tone she had been using with me lately. She said she was deeply offended by my implications. She claimed she had only been trying to be nice to me, and that I had completely misinterpreted her actions. Brittany stood up, her face flushed with anger. She said she couldn't believe I would think such horrible things about her. She accused me of having a dirty mind and twisting her innocent gestures into something perverted. Before I could respond or clarify anything, Brittany stormed out of the living room. I heard her running up the stairs and slamming the bedroom door shut. I stood there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Part of me felt guilty for upsetting her, wondering if I had indeed misread the situation. But another part of me felt relieved to have finally addressed the issue, regardless of her reaction. I went to my study and sat there, replaying the conversation in my mind. About an hour later, I heard John come home. There was some muffled conversation upstairs, and then silence. This morning, neither John nor Brittany came down for breakfast. When I went to the kitchen to make coffee, I found a note from John saying they had gone to stay with Brittany's parents for a few days. The note didn't mention anything about what had happened last night, which made me wonder what Brittany had told him. I'm now sitting in my quiet, empty house, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I'm glad I spoke up and set boundaries, but I'm worried about the repercussions this might have on my relationship with John. I'm not sure what will happen when they return. Will Brittany admit to her behavior? Will John believe me if I tell him what's been going on? Or have I just created a rift in our family that can't be repaired? I know I did the right thing by addressing the issue, but I can't help feeling like I've opened a can of worms. I'm preparing myself for a difficult conversation with John when they return. Thank you all for your support and advice on my original post. It gave me the courage to confront this uncomfortable situation. I'll update again once I have a chance to talk with John and figure out where we go from here. Update 2. After my last update, I felt lost and confused about the whole situation with Brittany and John. I decided to confide in my old friend, Mike. We've known each other for over 40 years, and he's always been a voice of reason in my life. I invited Mike over for coffee and told him everything that had happened. I explained Brittany's strange behavior, my confrontation with her, and their sudden departure to her parents' house. As I spoke, I noticed Mike's expression growing more and more concerned. When I finished my story, Mike was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that shook me to my core. He suggested that I might be looking at the situation from the wrong perspective. Mike reminded me that John had never been the most responsible or honest person, even as a child. He gently pointed out that John's behavior as an adult, living off my wealth, lying about the cryptocurrency investment, quitting his job to pursue a non-existent art career, all pointed to a pattern of manipulation and entitlement. Mike then presented a theory that made my blood run cold. He said it was possible that John might be planning to trap me in some kind of scandal with Brittany. The goal could be to extort money from me or secure a larger part of my inheritance. Mike hastened to add that he hoped this wasn't the case, but given John's history, we couldn't rule it out. I felt sick to my stomach at the thought. I didn't want to believe my own son could be capable of such deceit. But as I reflected on recent events, I had to admit that Mike's theory made a disturbing amount of sense. Mike offered to do some discreet investigating. He had some contacts in town who might be able to shed light on John's activities. I hesitated at first, feeling like I was betraying my son's trust. But then I remembered all the times John had betrayed my trust, and I agreed to let Mike look into it. A few days later, Mike came back with some troubling news. He discovered that John had never been going job hunting as he claimed. Instead, he had been spending his days at a friend's house, playing video games and drinking. This friend, it turned out, had a bit of a reputation as a small-time con artist. This revelation hit me hard. I had been proud of John for seemingly taking responsibility and looking for work. To find out it was all a lie felt like a punch to the gut. I realized that something was indeed very fishy about this whole situation. I asked Mike to dig deeper. I needed to know the full extent of what was going on. Mike was hesitant, warning me that I might not like what he found, but I insisted. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. A week passed, and I heard nothing from John or Brittany. I was a nervous wreck, jumping every time the phone rang or there was a knock at the door. Finally, Mike called and asked to meet me in person. From the tone of his voice, I knew he had found something significant. We met at a quiet coffee shop out of town, away from prying eyes and ears. Mike looked grim as he sat down across from me. He took a deep breath and told me what he had discovered through his contacts. Mike had uncovered a shocking plan. John and Brittany had been plotting to accuse me of making inappropriate advances towards Brittany. They intended to use this false accusation to force me into giving them a substantial part of my wealth and inheritance. They had even gone so far as to consult a lawyer about how to proceed with their plan. I felt like the ground had disappeared from beneath my feet. My own son, my flesh and blood, had been planning to destroy my reputation and extort me. And Brittany, who I had welcomed into my home and treated like a daughter, was complicit in this cruel scheme. As the shock wore off, it was replaced by a burning anger. I had spent years making excuses for John's behavior, always giving him the benefit of the doubt, but this was beyond forgiveness. This was a betrayal of the deepest kind. I thanked Mike for his help and went home to plan my next move. I spent the night poring over financial documents, changing passwords, and making calls to my lawyer and financial advisor. By morning, I had secured my assets and was ready to confront John and Brittany. I called John and told him I needed to speak with both of them urgently. He sounded nervous but agreed to come home with Brittany that afternoon. While I waited, Mike arrived with all the evidence he had gathered, including recordings and witness statements. When John and Brittany arrived, I was sitting in my study, Mike by my side. I asked them to sit down, and before they could say anything, I started speaking. I told them I knew everything about their plan. I laid out all the details. The false job hunting, the consultations with the lawyer, the planned accusation. John's face went pale, while Brittany looked like she might be sick. John tried to interrupt to deny everything, but I held up my hand to stop him. I told him I had proof of everything I was saying. Then, just as Mike had predicted, John tried to turn the tables. He stood up and pointed at me, his voice shaking with fake outrage. He accused me of making lewd advances towards Brittany, saying that was the real reason they had left. I let him finish his performance. Then I nodded to Mike, who started playing the recordings he had gathered. We heard John's voice discussing the plan with his friend, laughing about how they were going to take me for all I was worth. We heard Brittany's voice too, suggesting ways to make the false accusation more believable. As the recordings played, John and Brittany's faces crumpled. They realized they had been caught red-handed. There was no way to deny or explain away what we had all just heard. When the recordings finished, I spoke again. My voice was calm but cold. I told them I was deeply disappointed and hurt by their actions. I said I had always tried to be a good father and had welcomed Brittany into our family with open arms. Their betrayal was unforgivable. I then informed them that I wanted them out of my house immediately. I had already packed their belongings, which were waiting in the garage. I told them I had changed all the locks and security codes. I made it clear that they were no longer welcome in my home or my life. John tried to argue, to make excuses, but I shut him down. I told him that if he ever tried to contact me again or made any attempts to spread false accusations, I would not hesitate to make all of this evidence public. The thought of his reputation being destroyed seemed to finally silence him. Brittany started crying, begging for forgiveness, saying it was all John's idea. I didn't respond to her pleas. I simply stood up, walked to the door, and held it open, waiting for them to leave. With slumped shoulders and averted eyes, John and Brittany walked out of my study, out of my house, and out of my life. As I watched them drive away, I felt a mix of relief, sadness, and anger. Mike put a comforting hand on my shoulder. He reminded me that I had done the right thing, that I couldn't let them take advantage of me any longer. I nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling the ache of loss in my heart. Over the next few weeks, I took steps to protect myself legally and financially. I updated my will, removing John entirely. I informed our extended family about what had happened, wanting to get ahead of any stories John and Brittany might try to spread. It's been a month now since that confrontation. I haven't heard from John or Brittany, and I'm not sure I ever will again. Some days, the silence in the house is deafening. Other days, it's a blessed relief. I'm still processing everything that happened. I'm angry at John and Brittany for their betrayal, but I'm also angry at myself for being so blind to their true nature for so long. I'm working with a therapist to deal with these feelings and to learn how to move forward. I'm grateful for Mike's friendship and support through all of this. Without him, I might never have uncovered the truth. He's been checking in on me regularly, making sure I'm not isolating myself too much. As for the future, I'm not sure what it holds. I'm considering selling the house and moving to a smaller place, maybe in a different town. I think a fresh start might do me good. I'm also looking into volunteering opportunities. I have a lot of love to give, and if I can't give it to my own family, maybe I can make a difference in someone else's life. To everyone who read my original post and first update, thank you for your support and advice. Life has taken an unexpected and painful turn, but I'm determined to move forward. If there's one lesson I've learned from all this, it's the importance of trusting your instincts and not letting family ties blind you to the truth. Thank you for letting me share my story. I hope it might help someone else who finds themselves in a similar situation. Trust your gut, seek help when you need it, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even against family. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I, 34, female, am a private tutor. My neighbor, 41, female, requested that I tutor her 2 children, an 11-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl, in mathematics and science. Their grades have gone up to straight A's, with the younger even scoring perfect 100%. As requested, a huge discount as we were on good terms. I am listed as the girl's guardian with the agreement that sessions would be thrice a week. My usual rate for one-to-one tutoring starts at $140 an hour, and for her girls' levels, their individual rates would have been $150 an hour and $155 an hour, or $175 an hour for both girls together. However, she kept telling me about all her financial burdens, and I lowered the rate to $144 an hour for both of the girls. And I had settled on 3 sessions per week. I was clear from the start that weekends were my time for my dogs, and only urgent tuition requests were accepted then, with a higher rate starting at $160 an hour. But last week, she approached me saying her older girl was struggling in English and needed a temporary weekend slot at our regular rate. I didn't want to be calculative, so I accepted. After the first weekend lesson, she texted me to say that the girl suddenly had after-school activities and would have to drop one of that weekday slots. I agreed because these things do happen sometimes. After the second weekend lesson, she texted me again to tell me that she would only need tutoring on one weekday and one weekend from now on since she had signed her girls up for enrichment classes on another weekday when we were supposed to have a tutoring session. She seemed to expect the weekend slot to be a permanent arrangement. I was taken aback because I felt like I'd been forced to give up my weekend for a lower rate than normal. I tried to ask if it would be possible for her to change the enrichment classes to the weekend, but she texted me a short no. After consideration, I decided to put my foot down, and I texted her this. I want to be honest. I'm not entirely satisfied with this change. Initially, I agreed to the weekend slot because I thought your daughter urgently needed help in English as she was failing. Now, reducing the number of sessions feels like the urgency wasn't as pressing as I was led to believe. My weekend is for bonding activities with my dogs or urgent assignments only, which are supposed to be temporary arrangements. I hope you can understand my part. She replied with fine, then don't come. 2 days later, she texted me that she no longer wanted me to talk to her girls. She also unfriended me across all her social media. After that, I was still dropping by with breakfast for their family, and now the girls dare not even talk to me when I run into them. The younger one told me that she was really pissed off at me, but the elder shushed her. I'd also be asking to be removed as the girl's guardian. She's clearly taking advantage of you and doesn't like to be stood up to. If her daughter was really failing, she'd be dropping all social activities and after-school activities for that child and focusing on getting them a consistent routine until everything was back on track. You have a right to your weekends, and she doesn't have a right to expect you to drop everything for her and constantly do favors for her. And she was taking advantage. Your text was reasonable given the prior arrangements. Her childish response tells you all you need to know about the quality of this friendship. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I planned my wedding to my fiancé for 7 months. I was so sure that I wanted to marry him that there was no room for cold feet for me. He was the one I was choosing to marry, and I didn't care about anything else. I felt so sure about loving him and being together forever. Before our wedding, we each had parties with our friends. My party was incredible. The night before, I had an awesome time with my girls. My best friend is a guy, and I know some people don't get it, but he's just a close friend. We've never been romantic. I see him as my brother, a brother that I didn't have. Just before I reached the church on my wedding day, he called me and told me that there was something he had to tell me. I wondered what it was, so urgent that he couldn't wait until after the wedding, but he insisted that he had to speak to me first. I told him to meet me around the corner just before we got to the church. He showed me the pictures of my boyfriend cheating. Apparently, they went out the night before for his bachelor party, and he was having a lot of fun with a lot of girls. My best friend said that his conscience wouldn't let him be if he didn't let me know what I was getting into. He overheard my fiancé saying he didn't believe in being with just one person, even though he cared for me. He planned to have other relationships. My best friend felt really sorry but thought I needed to know the truth before making such a big decision. It was hard for me because I was about to marry him. All the guests were there, including my parents, who had come such a long way for the wedding ceremony. Was I going to call off the wedding and disappoint everyone? I wasn't sure what to do, and I had very little time to choose. I asked my best friend what I should do, but he said it was my decision to make, and he couldn't do it for me. He wanted to make sure I knew the truth. He promised to back me up no matter what, but the decision had to be mine. I chose to go to the church. As I walked down the aisle, I asked my fiancé how his night had been and what he did. He casually replied that it was good and he had a great time. I asked him if he did anything I should know about before we got married, and he said nothing at all, that he was a good boy as always. It was then I realized that I didn't want to marry him. I believe in monogamy and wanted my husband to be the same as myself. I didn't want him to cheat. If we hadn't gotten married yet and he was already cheating and saying that he would continue cheating, there was no hope. My fiancé, I made the decision himself with the responses he gave me. With tears in my eyes, I told everybody that I was sorry for making them come all the way, but there wouldn't be any wedding. Many people wanted an explanation, so I showed them the evidence. My best friend handed me the pictures showing him with other girls. I shared everything about his belief in non-monogamy and his plans for affairs even after marriage. I made it clear that I couldn't accept that, and it was a deal breaker for me. Though I loved him, I knew my love alone couldn't sustain our relationship. I rushed to leave, and people came after me to make sure that I was okay. I wasn't in the mood to speak to anyone, so I hid somewhere until I was sure they wouldn't see me. I desperately wanted time to myself, but my fiancé's boss found me. He was charming and told me that he wouldn't give me up for anything if he was my fiancé. He asked me to get married to him instead. He mentioned that he had always liked me but stopped sending me signals when he noticed that my relationship with my fiancé was serious. I had noticed when he flirted with me a few times we met. I thought he was attractive, but I didn't let any other thoughts dwell because I was committed to my fiancé. I saw this wealthy and charming man at an event organized by my fiancé's company. He seemed perfect in every way, despite knowing my fiancé wasn't the brightest. I agreed to marry him out of sheer spite. It was a rash decision, and I'm not sure what prompted me to do that. Acting on impulse like that gave me a bit of an adrenaline rush, and at that moment, I dragged his boss back to the church with me and announced that I was engaged to his boss. We were going to get married soon. Everybody thought I was crazy. Well, I don't blame them because I was actually crazy. They tried to make me calm down and think through what I was doing and what I said, but I let them know that I knew exactly what I was doing. Everyone in my family was disappointed in my fiancé. Even his parents were. My fiancé wasn't there when I came back, but my best friend told me that everyone pounced on him, telling him how horrible he was. A lot of them gave him a piece of their mind, and I think that he would have a lot to think about for the rest of his life. He kept calling me, but I didn't want to speak to him. I didn't even want to see him ever for the rest of my life. I had nothing to say to him. He had done his worst. The best part was that I couldn't feel the pain at that time. I had a surge of adrenaline thinking of what I had just done, getting engaged to his boss. I knew that the pain would come rushing down on me once I calmed down. I was going to marry someone I didn't know so well and had never dated. It's funny that at that time it sounds exciting. His boss kept asking me if I was okay and needed anything because I was with him. I left the church with him. He put in a lot of effort to cheer me up and distract me from what had happened earlier. Our conversation was wonderful, and I saw a whole new side of him that I hadn't seen before. He was genuinely nice, and I started thinking that maybe marrying him wasn't such a terrible idea after all, especially considering I had already agreed to it. I intended to keep my word if he was okay. We talked until very late, and he dropped me at home. I still live with my parents, so they were still up when I got home. Everybody rushed to me, trying to speak at the same time. I could tell that they were very worried about me. I assured them that I was okay. Plus, I didn't look sad or look like I had been crying. I guess I lied to them because as I got into my room, the tears came rushing down, and everything hit me. I was still in my wedding dress, and I felt like tearing it to pieces. I was supposed to be going on my honeymoon to move into my new home when we came back. It was like a movie playing in my head, recalling everything that happened that day. When I reached the moment I agreed to marry his boss, it hit me hard. I couldn't believe I had made such a decision. I cried like I had never cried before, so much so that my family heard me and rushed to my door to comfort me. It's a good thing it was luck because I didn't want to see anyone. My fiancé and I dated for about 3 years, and he took everything from me. It's been 2 weeks since the incident, and I have kept in touch with my ex's boss, husband, and you could say he has been nothing but amazing to me. He didn't bring up any relationship or marriage talk, which was a relief. A few moments ago, my ex called me, and I just wanted to answer for some reason. I had been ignoring his calls since the wedding. He was shocked that I answered. He was expecting it to go to voicemail like the other ones. He apologized, and I told him to save it. I didn't need an apology because he could have just done the right thing. He said that he didn't mean to be rude, but he wanted to ask me for a favor. He said that if I ever had any feelings for him, I should plead with his boss to give him back his job. I didn't know that he was fired, and I had no hand in it. It really hit me hard when he had the nerve to ask me for a favor. I was so upset that he lost his job, and honestly, I wished he'd never find another one. He lost me and his job all because of his stupidity. He deserves it, doesn't he? I couldn't understand why he thought I'd help him or why I should even care about his job loss or if anything happened to him. He just showed me how selfish and self-centered he is. I'm glad that I didn't marry him because I would have been miserable. I fought through some scenarios, and I realized that I was blinded by love. He was not the right person for me at all, and there were so many things wrong with our relationship. He tended to cheat, and those red flags were everywhere, but I ignored them because I was in love. I'm grateful to my best friend for showing me the pictures and videos because if I hadn't seen them, I would have been married to the worst person for me. I would have been leaving a sad and disappointed married life with somebody I thought I loved. NTA. You seem to have dodged a bullet, so congratulations are in order. Your ex doesn't deserve you. I know that you will find the love of your life, which may just be his boss. And to your fiancé, he betrayed you and still asked for a favor. I thought he would be remorseful and ashamed. Please block him. I think that's what you should do next. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I, 31, female, and my husband, 33, are child-free. We also work from home on a regular basis, and both our jobs involve doing a lot of meetings and talking. We have a 3-bedroom house where one of the rooms is used as a guest room, while another is made as an office. When both my husband and I have work meetings together, we usually switch to different rooms. Our house is set up in a way that the bedrooms are upstairs, and downstairs is where we have the kitchen, dining area, and living room. Something unexpected happened when my sister-in-law, who had some home repairs going on, planned to stay elsewhere. Unfortunately, her arrangements got messed up, leaving her with nowhere to stay during the day. That's when she reached out and asked if she could spend her time at our place while the repairs were being done, with her kids, a 10-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy. I think that school is currently closed due to the COVID outbreak, but I'm not sure. Me and my husband explained that both of us work from home most of the time, and we will not be able to take time off to watch her or her kids. She promised they would behave. Yesterday, my husband was asked to come to the office, so I was alone with my sister-in-law and her kids. It was our first day out of 2 weeks of repairs. I was getting ready for my meeting when I heard a screeching sound. I initially thought that the kids were watching TV and might have turned it on too loud, so I asked them to turn it down and started the meeting. The meeting I was in became awkward due to an ongoing noise that was heard by everyone attending. I attempted to switch rooms to get away from it, but the noise persisted, disrupting the meeting. I had to excuse myself and head downstairs to figure out what was causing the disturbance. It turned out that my youngest sister-in-law was throwing a tantrum, causing the commotion, and she seemed unwilling to do anything about it. I have politely asked if she can calm down her child as the noises he makes make me uncomfortable and interfere with my job. She says okay, and I go back to my home office hoping to rejoin the meeting. However, the sound didn't stop, and in fact it became worse. The kid has started banging on the floor. I come down again and tell my sister-in-law that she should parent her child and stop this behavior as I'm trying to work, or they have to leave. She was trying to get into an argument, but I said I had enough, and she has to leave now and is no longer welcome to stay for the 14 days she originally planned. When my husband returned, he agreed with me. However, we have already received calls from his parents, calling me an a-hole for kicking them out. After I gave my sister-in-law plenty of time to calm down the kids, and she could take him outside to the garden or the car, she opted not to intervene despite the situation. Contrary to what my sister-in-law claimed, the child wasn't autistic or facing any issues. The tantrum erupted simply because we wouldn't allow the child to play on our console. We don't have any games suitable for his age, and he has a history of breaking things. The game he wanted to play was an adult horror game, which obviously wasn't suitable for his age. To clarify the above, my sister-in-law claims the kid is not autistic or has any mental health issues or issues that can cause such behavior. In no way or form have I intended it to sound as if the kid has autism, and I don't believe the sister-in-law has. Also, that house is available to stay at. Only one room is being renovated. Their bedrooms, bathroom, and kitchen are still available to use. She just wanted to stay with someone else during the daytime as she's not fond of the buildings and doesn't like the noise they make as the builders are there from about 9 to 6. After that, she has no issues returning home and staying there. Seems like we figured out why those other plans fell apart. Your sister-in-law might be really used to handling her rowdy kid, so she didn't even react to the racket. Maybe she thought letting the child have a moment to calm down during the tantrum wasn't a bad idea. But here's the thing. When guests are at someone's place, and folks are working, keeping the noise down is the main goal. It's all about balancing things right. Now on to the next story. Story 6. After 16 years of marriage, my wife cheated and convinced everyone I'm the bad guy. Now she's hired a lawyer and wants a divorce, despite me trying to save our family. 2 weeks ago, on Sunday, our 12th anniversary, 16 years total, my young son hands me his iPad to help with a game, and a very racy text pops up via messages. I thought it was a mistake at first because there were so few issues in our relationship that I couldn't comprehend this being something she'd do. We seemed to have such good teamwork with the kids, but our sex life had become slow. She started her own business and was still taking care of so much of the house, which I obviously should have helped more. But this was never a topic of discussion, so I didn't realize just how off things had gotten. I freak out. I'm on the floor shaking in disbelief. When I finally compose myself, I call her and ask, "Are you cheating on me?" "Not right now," she says. Again, I can't believe it. She says she's coming home. We have it out, and I am in absolute shock, just like the lot of you folks who've come to the same awful discovery. Later on, I say I'm willing to go into therapy for this, to try and save our family of 4 from having to go through the absolute trauma of divorce and separate families. We've each been to 2 sessions so far, 1 together, 1 individual. We've done a lot of writing in an attempt to get our emotions out on paper and evaluate the marriage. I guess she's distant but still in the house with me and the kids. I've taken to preparing just about everything now, including some of the kids' lunches, but dinner every night, plus all the laundry, all the work she used to do on her own. If I had done this a year ago, I would have realized just how much work she put in and how stressful it was. She says she doesn't want to hurt me more by talking about her feelings, but it's been weeks since she's really talked to me about anything of substance. I finally got her to open up a bit this morning, and it seems like she wants to blame me for our situation without truly accepting any responsibility for her life and the kids she'd split up if she opts for divorce. Those kids love us both so much, and they're completely accustomed to having us both around, no matter what. I find it hard to believe that with what we've built together over the last 16 years, that she'd give it up for someone who she believes might be a new soulmate. She's known him for 3 weeks. Somehow, This emotional connection she's got to the guy has shaken her to the point where she believes we've had no happy moments in our life together. It's caused my anxiety to skyrocket and to suspect those of our friends who are closer to her. I've probably destroyed those bonds despite them knowing nothing about the trust. One solemnly regret not taking on more house duties. But we never talked about the issues she's now saying are her reasons for questioning our relationship. What do I do? I still love her without question, and I want our kids to grow up with both their mom and dad. Thanks for your help. I really do appreciate your time. Date 1. We rarely fought, and when we did, I was the one to get upset or I caused the problem. The only time I know I was an absolute idiot was once when I was at my own birthday party. She kept trying to interrupt me while I was mid-conversation with someone, and I treated her like a child. I'm talking, even relaying that makes me feel sick to my stomach. It's not who I am. I'd been drinking, which is something I rarely ever do, and by rarely, I mean it's never more than once a year. This incident has been one she's hinged on. It never happened before that night and certainly hasn't happened since, but it sticks to her. Typically, when we have any kind of discussion, it's just a matter of her telling me what she needs or wants, and then I try my best to take care of it or make a plan. For instance, she wanted a bookcase in our living room, floor to ceiling, so I got with a woodworking buddy of mine, and we just started planning. Had all of this not happened, I probably would have already started building it. Took a while to get there, but the plan was in place and moving forward. That's pretty typical for how our lives have been. I never threatened her with divorce just to get my way or anything ridiculous like that. Neither did she. Never once did we mention marriage counseling to one another for any reason. Now I wish one of us had. She's always been so focused on everyone else's needs that I just don't remember her asking me for emotional help. If she was serious, sat me down and said something like, "We need to talk about this," I know for damn sure I would have listened intently and helped in any way I could have, even if it meant supporting her from the sideline when it came to this situation. Before she even did anything with the AP, she said she wanted to talk to me but was afraid I'd be violent with her. I've never ever touched her in any such fashion, not once. I'll hit my controller when I get upset at a game, but I have never laid a hand on my wife, not on our worst day. This was asinine to me and hurt almost as much as being cheated on and lied to. Unfortunately, she seems like she's done with me, and nothing I say makes it better. When I brought up my personal request to not be separated from the kids, she got angry. I'm sure she believed I was trying to manipulate her into making a decision. Sure, a large part of me hopes she will consider them too, but that's really what I want, to continue to see the kids on a daily basis. I'm very upfront with her and have continued to be through this whole ordeal, possibly too much. Last Sunday, she dropped the bomb. I've been manipulative, and she needs out of the house. I took this to heart and believed her. Hours of disbelief that I could be that person and a fair amount of crying followed. She very well may be right, but over the last few days, I've been the one receiving the manipulation also. She's been depressed and never mentioned that could be a possibility to me or any of her friends. Like ever. I may have been too close to her daily to see the signs, but someone would have noticed, right? I honestly don't know, as I've only had close proximity to anxiety. She has moved into her parents' house, which doesn't have many rooms, so I have no idea how this is going to work for her plans to keep my oldest, 7-year-old, during the week to take her to school while I keep our 4-year-old to take him to school. Currently, they go to separate schools on very different sides of town. Edit. I heavily protested splitting the kids and told her she needed to pick up our oldest from my home. I got a sob story about having to wake up too early to make that work. I nearly told her that this is all her fault and to deal with the consequences. In the interest of not upsetting our situation even further and escalating to an argument, I acquiesced unwillingly. Thanksgiving was the absolute worst day for me, but it requires some backstory. I had agreed to go over to our mutual friend's house, a couple who also have 2 kids nearly the same age as ours. This is my wife's best friend, and perhaps due to her high level of intelligence, is never wrong. Let's call her Jill. Jill is married to Bill. Now, to be fair, I poisoned the well a bit on Discovery Day by assuming Jill knew about my wife's other guy and accusing Jill pretty directly before my wife got home for the big fight. She got upset I had assumed as much and berated me as I apologized to her in person the following day. She said something about being careful so this wouldn't turn into resentment. I was weak and accepted this as necessary. That has changed now. I'm angry and have been for at least 3 days prior to Thanksgiving. In fact, I found out on Thanksgiving Eve that Jill had called my mom to tell her that they love me and are worried about the kids and that I haven't reached out to talk to them about the situation. Excuse me, you didn't call me, you called my mom? I sent Jill a text that said my mom was worried by this but doing just fine, and if they wanted, I was willing to talk to them on Thanksgiving Day, up to them. She refused outright, saying it wouldn't be proper and she hoped she wouldn't have to remind anyone of that. She's got this teacher/parent hat she puts on even when talking to friends. It's definitely a point in the con column because it's fake and ridiculously holier than thou. Despite this seeming like a cop-out, as I was sure there would be some downtime, I replied cordially with, of course, that's why I left it up to you. My wife has had the kids for Thanksgiving Eve, and they all stayed the night, quite uncomfortably at Jill and Bill's. Not many rooms there either, but apparently, the high level of discomfort and my 7-year-old's allergies plus asthma wasn't enough for her to bring the kids home for the night. That's fine, make them suffer along with you. Thanksgiving Day, I head over at about 1 p.m. So far, I've played with my kids, cleaned up a little, tried to help, and been told no and generally let my wife have her space. It hits about 3 o'clock, and my 4-year-old needs something they can't solve at Jill and Bill's. Bill, ever the gentleman, seriously pops out to the med store and purchases the item necessary. He comes back, offers us the item. You didn't have to do that, thank you, I said, paraphrasing here because I was so surprised by this next bit. Jill says, at least forward progress was made. I start in with a well-reasoned, well, while we tried X before that and we made some progress, forward progress was made. Needless to say, I was shocked. She attacked me for thanking her husband and trying to give some context to an easily explained position, which I believed benefited from clarity. I turned ahead for the door briefly, reconsidered, then opened it anyway. I sat in my car and took some deep breaths while attempting to find some semblance of logic for my next move. I decided that this was just too much of an uncomfortable situation for everyone involved, and despite how much I wanted to sit with my kids and eat, I had a much greater desire to be out of that house. If I was going to continue to be treated in similar fashion, especially if it was in front of my kids, I weighed how it would look if I just drove off, thought better of it, then headed inside to tell my oldest I'd be leaving. But why, she asked. Because it's just not necessary for me to be here today. I love you so much, and I'm sorry. I will see you tonight if you want to come home. Just have mommy call me. Okay? I can come pick you up. She was sad, but I think she understood. Luckily, no one except us adults were inside for that idiotic attack. I left and spent Thanksgiving alone at home. I called my mom to vent, and she wanted me to go to 100 other houses for dinner, but I had an inkling that no matter where I went, I'd bring the party down. The rest of the day was too fresh and stressful. After getting home, I sent Bill a text apologizing for leaving. He told me they love me, that I'm welcome to be there, and didn't know why Jill turned on me like that. I replied that I didn't know either, but I'm no longer comfortable being there. I thanked him for his kind words. That was the last I've heard from them about this situation. No apology from Jill. I don't expect one. We've hit resentment thanks to her reaction to something wholly inconsequential. Imagine if it had been important. I've had both kids since Friday, and they've made all the difference. I feel almost 100% just having them in the house. We're all still sad and prone to a bit of crying, but I think we're getting better, a bit at a time. Update 2. She moved out after cheating on me and decided to split our kids during the week, to which I protested, and she gave me a sob story about why she couldn't pick up our eldest from our home in the morning. Well, having gone along with it for this week, my youngest just asked me, when is mommy coming home? I said, mommy's not coming home, and nearly threw up in my mouth. I feel so horrible telling him this. How do I make it easier on him and me too? Sometimes he's okay after I've said it, when he has relied on her so heavily for 4 years. Update 3. I know you'll never read this because you've somehow transitioned from a loving mother who cared deeply about family and its strong opinions on cheaters into what you claim to despise. I get it. He was there and smelled good. Here's what else I get. You're childish, a piss-poor communicator, and a selfish idiot who tries to do way too much to fill this void you don't even know you have or why it's there. You say you love the kids, and while that may be true, You've presented the worst possible example of how a relationship works to them and additionally chosen a terrible friend to confide in. You can't even tell your friends what you really did because you're too embarrassed, but saying sorry and asking for forgiveness for me or our kid who actually understands what's happening. No, not in your wheelhouse anymore. You gave yourself permission by claiming I was manipulative for over 14 years. You acted pretty damn happy for someone who was being constantly coerced. I always showed you love and gave affection, even when I was just passing you in the house. Saying otherwise is a lie and you know it. And I can't wait to hear you say it because you know it's not true. You went on your first cruise ever with a female friend instead of me. Red flag in hindsight. You bragged about the bartender and how you were sure he was into you. You went to a convention to work, something I thought the kids and I could enjoy with you, but you made sure we didn't come. There was no room for discussion. You went other places and told me about the men you saw and swooned over. But did I ever once say anything along the lines of, hey, I don't want you doing this anymore? No. Want to know why? Because I trusted you inherently. I thought they were harmless fantasy. You always thought I'd have been the one to cheat on you, and boy, I sure had the opportunities. Guess what? I have a conscience. I have vows I made, a promise to you. Strangely, you made the same promise, but it meant F all when you found your construction worker. What a damn cliche. He's got kids from at least one, but I actually think it's 2 other marriages, so yeah, I'm sure he's a winner. Why didn't you just effing talk this out with me instead of acting like a child? You disgust me, and I hope the kids don't have to be exposed to you or your toxic family much longer. Date for today. She hired a lawyer. I met with one too, but I was convinced I still wanted to go finish counseling and try to make things better. Today she told me our marriage will be no more. She's got zero qualms about what she did to our family. Somehow, I'm the bad guy to all her friends despite her infidelity. I don't have family around me to help get both kids to school like she does. But her housing situation is absolute trash. She's at her parents' house, planning on putting both kids in the same room in a bunk bed instead of what they have here at home. Each has their own room and bed. She went behind my back to have her friend set up to continue afternoon childcare when I already told said friend she wasn't going to be needed anymore. I applied to have my youngest in daycare after school in lieu of the friend, as well as set up transportation for him to said care. Youngest doesn't even want to go to the friend's house anymore. Kept saying he didn't want to go to school until I told him he didn't have to go to her house. Then he was totally agreeable about going to school. Gee, I wonder what the problem was. What in the world has happened to my life? I don't know what she said to her friends to convince them, but she claimed I've been manipulative when we talked, which is strange because she's been gaslighting me for weeks now, claiming I've said and done things I just wouldn't say or do. Date 5. I'll give you the short version I got from her lawyer to mine, along with rebuttal. 1. I have anger issues. I do not, unless it's one very specific video game where I have broken controllers 3 times over the last 15 years. Never resulted in anyone getting hurt other than me, and those were superficial to my knuckles. 2. I have a short temper with our kids' disabilities. Admittedly, this may be true, but she seems to have endless patience with them and rarely, if ever, scolds them for doing anything wrong. I see this as me putting up with less crap. They're still kids and require discipline. Additionally, neither is on the spectrum, which would require a different style entirely. 3. I do not hit my children on anything other than their back or a light but noticeable tap on the forehead to get attention. Also, I haven't touched our oldest like this in at least 2 years, probably more. She's really a solidly behaved child. I did yell at them or get frustrated easily, though. That's on me and my anxiety. 4. I have a gaming addiction. You could actually prove this is false by going to all the game systems we've got and totaling up time. My personal play time for the last 8 weeks across all platforms would end up being less than 3 hours per week of solo time, and it's almost entirely on Rocksmith. X plays games too, so I'm not sure where this comes from. Maybe the AP feeding her lines? 5. I cheated on her. Categorically false. I would willingly take a polygraph or undergo voluntary forensic research on my communications devices to prove it. I never so much as kissed another woman in any way that could be construed as passionate. I brought other women to the house and propositioned them for a threesome. Half-truth. We talked about this between us, a possibility, and agreed it was a mutual fantasy. When she told me she thought a girl was cute/attractive, and I knew them, I'd cautiously approach about it if the potential third seemed interested. My ex would never feel comfortable, however, so I stopped inviting them over for any purpose other than usual friendly stuff. I've even talked to them since I heard this allegation, and one of them actually laughed at me when I told her. She couldn't believe how asinine it was. She also said she never felt pressured or like my ex didn't know about the offer because we talked about it out loud, being flirty in general. Update 6. I have a strong belief that my soon-to-be ex-wife's best friend, let's call her A, encouraged my ex to stray by feeding her false narratives for months. A is married and also has 2 children, and I've come to learn, looking back on our interactions over the last 5 or so years, is ridiculously manipulative. Is it common for people like this to live vicariously? Is she also planning an exit? Was she just meddling because she could and somehow came to dislike me despite saying she loved us as a family? Admittedly, we had some weird dynamics, some occasional flirtation that would never go anywhere, and the occasional pat on the back, both by her and by me, which happened while my wife was right there, and she never seemed bothered. I stopped feeling comfortable with it after a while and cut down on these interactions over the last year or so. I have often wondered over the last 2 months if this played a role in her vilification of me. I don't know if I felt rejected or something. She never brought it up to me. The reason I believe A is to blame is her reaction when I asked her about knowledge of my soon-to-be ex-wife's AP. She got angry at me for assuming she knew anything instead of sympathy for being cheated on. I realize I'm untangling the skein of F-tupness, but it's bugged me unendingly. Anyone have an experience like this? Update 7. Has anyone here suspected being honey-trapped after your separation by your cheater? I've got some potentially ridiculous suspicions about events that have occurred in the last few months, but I wanted to see if it's just me being paranoid. I don't want to share details because if it's true, it means she knows this account is mine when there should be no way for her to piece the 2 things together. I got love-bombed, yes, but not by my soon-to-be ex-wife. It was someone who found me online. This person had an online presence until I decided it was moving way too fast for me, not to mention a load of unstable behaviors, and broke it off. That person, in their online presence, disappeared almost completely overnight. A whole blog is just no longer in existence, and the timing seems really weird. There was also an offer made for something I might have liked, but I can't get into details on that. The timing is just suspect. If I had to put a conspiracy to it, it's as if my soon-to-be ex-wife is trying to take advantage of my proclivities in order to get a better deal for the divorce. This isn't pervasive, by the way. I'm not seeing this in my day-to-day life, just online. Update 8. Apparently, I'm difficult to talk to, which is why you tried exactly once, according to yourself, to approach me about any of the issues you felt were bearing down on you in our marriage, yet never said a damn word that these things were nagging issues we should try to fix. Apparently, everything has to be my way, which is why when you decided to change our entire family's diet every couple of years, I went along with it completely. Or when you wanted to start your own businesses with your parents, I pitched in and helped build for 3 months of weekends, stock the store for 2 months of weekends per year, purchase supplies, lay concrete, buy a computer and an iPad, look after the kids to enable you to do those things. Or when you requested I make you a latte or mocha daily and worked hard to pay attention to get it just right, constantly tweaking the ingredients and prep so you'd love it every time, just a little more than the last. Those instances were all about me because I like my underwear folded instead of tossed in the drawer. It's not even tit for tat. Apparently, you knew nothing about our money situation despite saying you always felt like a burden and me reassuring you that we would be fine, even when you requested funds to be transferred to your account. You didn't know how much I made except that I told you every single time when I got a raise and how much I'd be getting total per year and per month. You didn't know how much stock I had except I told you how much it would be worth when it was vested after 4 years and kept you apprised on the share value almost weekly. You didn't know how much was in the Robinhood account except I showed it to you to say, this is going to be our vacation money in the near future. You also didn't know how much you racked up on those credit cards you never mentioned after you first got them. So when I finished paying off the ones I knew about, yours were still left over. Weird how that works. Apparently, your mom thinks I'm too strict with the kids and has never liked me. What? But she beat you with a wooden kitchen implement until you were 12 years old and then never got you any help when you were sexually assaulted by a family member. I just yell at the kids so they don't damage property or themselves. I confess it's because I like having them alive and not paying random amounts of money to get someone else's crap fixed. But sure, this is all my fault. Had you been an adult and tried to talk to me about any of this, it could have easily been corrected. And if I thought our marriage was ever on the line, don't you think I would have put in that time? Coward. Instead, you chose to cheat with a serial cheater who has his own set of kids, and now you think they're your forever family, lady. Do you ever have a surprise in store? I feel mostly sorry for his kids. They love you because you've integrated into their lives already. When you leave or he cheats, which is where my bet lies, they're going to be devastated. That's a crappy adulting decision right there. But yeah, all of it is definitely my fault. You go on and keep churning through this alternative reality you got going. Please don't let me know how it turns out. Just do me a huge favor. Don't F up our kids. Update 9. Just heard from our oldest kid. She's 11. That my ex-wife's version of our divorce is she feels I took everything from her. This is after she got more than half of our savings after the split. I purchased her car for her outright, so she has no car payment. I alone packed all of her belongings from our marital home into boxes and filled the garage. It was all her stuff from before the marriage or things she'd accumulated during, and she never requested a date to take care of it. It all sat in my garage for over 6 months. She only wanted more money in the mediation and immediately gave up nearly all visitation for our kids when I obliged. I have 80% time. If I could say one thing to her, it would be, welcome to the consequences of your own decisions. We've been split for almost 4 years, and she's still blaming me for her decision to cheat. The worst part is hearing it from my kid because, of course, they're gonna believe mom when she tells them this crap. Update 10. She had a baby with her AP not long after we split and named the poor little guy after a deity of divine beauty. Like, how ridiculous can you get? To make matters worse, she wants to move herself, the AP, and his 2 kids. He actually has 3. But kick the oldest out of the house to another state. She would almost literally never see her biological kids. To top it all off, her AP is legally still married to his ex. She's nuts. Unfortunately, this was communicated from my daughter to a step-grandparent in confidence. I don't want my daughter to lose trust in her. The information is important enough that I needed to know, so I'm glad I was told. And yes, trust was broken, but I can't break the bond when it's still fairly new. My wife and I haven't even been married for a year. My kid needs to know she can trust her adults to look out for her, and they can keep secrets when they're appropriate. This situation isn't quite as hot as, say, verbal or physical abuse, that it requires me to talk to my kid to let her know that I know what's going on, and the situation is dangerous enough that it requires immediate action. I've dealt with that once before already, maybe a story for another post. All of that to say, I can't approach my daughter to make a clear and concise rebuttal. I have to wait for her to tell me directly or figure out a way to get her to repeat it so I can give her that, you don't know both sides, so don't make an incomplete conclusion suggestion. I have absolutely told my daughter that her mom has not been 100% truthful with her in other instances, though, so I imagine that's why this statement didn't come to me personally. I tend to shatter the illusion she has of this amazing mom. Hard not to when she gets lied to so consistently. There's a lot of discussions that start with, that may be mom's recollection, but here's what I remember. 11 is too young for most kids to be told this outright. I imagine my wife has laid the groundwork that cheating is the worst thing you can do to your person because of how it affects them, but neither of us has told our kids she has 2 bio kids from a previous marriage as well, so directly that the other parent cheated to get where they are. Her ex has told some stupid tales to their kids. For example, our love was too strong, and we couldn't help it. That required tactful management. Honestly, I think it comes down to the emotional maturity of the kid. They probably shouldn't be any younger than 16 if those facts even need to be said aloud. But kids are all different. They're also pretty smart and figure stuff out on their own. Edit. I think my oldest already knows. She told me she hated the AP so much that she didn't even speak to him for a full year. She would leave the room when he entered. Her mom had to have a sit-down talk to have her give him a chance. She had a therapist. They're not all created equal, unfortunately, and now that the divorce is finalized as of 2021, my ex and I have joint conservatorship over medical matters, so we have to agree on a therapist, which is not an easy task. The therapist she had was way overstepping my boundaries with my daughter and my ex, and when confronted with that, decided to pick sides. I mainly wanted her to stop sending personal letters to my daughter while she was away at camp and to stop siding with either of us in matters where legally she had no sway. She shared personal information in those letters that didn't seem appropriate to me, and when I told her I didn't appreciate it and wanted that to stop, she accidentally sent a message to me that was meant for my ex. It said, "I am hopeful that it's all bad right now. We'll make some specific alterations to the kid schedule. Daughter wants more time with you, and we'll take it any time you can be together when she is with you. She is happy. Also wondering if she has gained weight since the shift. It appears to be so, but hard to tell on the computer. She seems more depressed and sad each week." This email happened a couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized. My ex had agreed to everything in the mediation, then started leaning on this therapist to have me make changes she just agreed to. So yes, she needs a therapist, but my ex pushes for my daughter to go back to the one who has taken my ex's side. They're people too, and can be won over by the right lies. Now on to the next story. Story 7. This is a throwaway account. So the story began when I discovered my wife's infidelity. Let's call her Carrie. After 14 years of marriage and 3 kids, I saw a text appear on a work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that was romantically graphic and had no business being on anyone's work phone. The message was on the lock screen, and this sender's name was visible. Let's call him Paul. Background. I married Carrie when I was 25, and she was 22. I was teaching high school at the time, and she was a registered nurse. After having our first child, Carrie became a stay-at-home mom. Money was tight, so I took on an admin role in my department and coached sports for the students. We made do, and after a few annual pay raises, I stopped coaching and took advantage of a program to earn an administrative credential. Once I made the jump to administration, our last child was ready for preschool, and Carrie decided that she wanted to go back to work. Nursing jobs are always available, but they're not always the best options. Carrie pretty much had to start working back at the bottom, working alongside nurses that were a lot younger than she was and could work back-to-back double shifts. That took a toll on Carrie. When she asked her supervisor about other positions, she was told that without a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, she wasn't going to move up. I told her that between preschool, after school, and my retired mother who was always willing to pick up the kids from school and watch them, I'd support getting her degree. It took her 3 years, but eventually, she earned her degree and was promoted to a better position at the hospital. Things were good for a while. We had plenty of money, so we finally moved into our own McMansion, bought new cars, etc. I had moved from school administrator to district administrator, so I had more time to spend with Carrie and the kids. She was working a more predictable schedule, and even with my often long hours at work, this change allowed us to finally take vacations to all the places we'd put on a list during our honeymoon. At some point, years later, I noticed that she started carrying 2 phones with her. When I asked her about it, she said that it was a phone provided by the hospital. I didn't question her explanation because my district had also given me the option of a phone. Again, months went by, and I thought that we were a happy, perfect family. When I went to go charge my phone in our den, I saw a light blinking on her work phone. She had a habit of always turning her phones face down when charging them. Out of curiosity, I reached over to the phone and flipped it over. A message popped up on the lock screen asking her when she'd like to be orally pleased again, but in much more graphic language. I also saw that it was sent by a guy named Paul. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were, what the hell was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie having an affair? It's funny how the brain works. I suddenly start to remember a lot of the things that Carrie had done that seemed odd, but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always walking out of the room to answer a call or return a text, and she claimed that it would violate HIPAA if I overheard her talking about a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. She would sometimes come home with a faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claim that it was from helping to move male patients. Again, I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to be the same scent of cologne. Once the proverbial barn door was open, I started seeing a lot of things that I had missed before. Our love life in the bedroom had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her having to leave the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses who called in sick. I also remember where I'd seen the name Paul before, and I called the hospital to confirm that he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I was walking around in a daze trying to put all the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so I used that as an excuse to visit the hospital. Carrie had told me that personal visits were frowned upon. I sent my kid up to get Carrie's car key, and I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing, but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which did not include Carrie. With pretty much everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie. She'd been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. I'd lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me is that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration. Let's call her Jen, and she had gotten married at 19 years old, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she'd focused on her career, and we'd found out that we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Jen, and she said something to me that made me change my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand that you're dealt, change the deck. I realized that I had two problems. I made more money than Carrie, and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions, and there are jobs that administrators just suffer through. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. I sat down with our district superintendent and asked to be transferred to that position. At first, he was shocked, but I told him that it was my turn to take one for the team and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personnel or student interactions, so I could set my own schedule and even take my laptop and work from home. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. Even though the end goal was to become their primary caretaker, I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make a lot more money than she was in her current nursing position. I remember Carrie being mad when her supervisor told her that in the future, bachelor's degrees will be worthless, and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Carrie had worked hard to get her bachelor's degree, and that supervisor's comment pissed all over her hard work. So I talked Carrie into pursuing a master's degree in nursing. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I could just take care of the kids. She was reluctant at first, but then I said, "You could have every evening free to study or go to class or whatever you want to do." I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Paul. To make sure that she was actually completing her master's degree courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to the university. It was going to take her 2 to 3 years to finish. Those years were pretty rough at times. I could tell every time that she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Paul. There was an excitement or a sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend that I just didn't notice. My temper got short at times, and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. A couple of times, I almost blew it, and I had to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. Jen remained my confidant throughout all of this. I had recommended her for my pre-fast track position, and she joined me at the district office. She was qualified, hardworking, ambitious, and only needed to get her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she impressed everyone. And I started our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but instead, Two friends giving each other what they needed without any strings attached. I wouldn't have been able to maintain this charade of being the oblivious cuckold. So when Carrie would come home smiling after spending time with Paul, I was able to bear it and smile back because I had my own lover. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her master's degree and got a promotion at the hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. When the kids and I made our congratulations dinner, I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family, and she laughed, joking back that I should be the stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I went back to that same lawyer who didn't remember me at first, and I told her the financial situation had drastically changed with these new facts. She drafted the petition for divorce and filed it when the kids were with my mother. I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door, and I let him in and pointed at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about her affair with Paul, but I didn't tell her how long I had known. I told her to go be happy with her doctor lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing towards me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence too. He suggested she pack a bag and stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about our affair. I didn't tell the kids, but I did tell my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who then told my kids. Took a few days, but eventually, the kids knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted my divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids because I was already their primary caretaker. I kept the house with the promise that I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half, and she was ordered to pay me child support. I used that back to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home, and with a little borrowed money from my parents, I bought out Carrie's portion of my home and my retirement. The day that Carrie signed all the paperwork, finally ending any possible financial obligations to her, was the happiest I'd ever been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with Jen, who had been my rock throughout all of this. I'm not ashamed to say that through the years, I cried many times in her arms, and then I would eventually get married. She got promoted to a higher position, and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing for a few months. Carrie took a real beating from the kids about why she needed a boyfriend when Daddy was there. But between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I actually felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so I encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I proposed to Jen, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Paul too. She got sad. She told me that Paul had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with Carrie's new position, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who had cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration, years of knowing that some other man was sleeping with my wife. I had lost weight from not being able to eat. I had suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor that it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complaining that I was grinding my teeth, and I would need dental implants if I kept that up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade. Fortunately, it was only occasionally, and I had to lie that I wanted to use condoms to remind me of what it was like when we first started dating or because I might have a bladder infection. Then I would go take an STD test anyway and wait for the results before seeing Jen again. But in the end, it was all worth it. Sure, Carrie got a big payout when I bought out her half of the house and the retirement, but that's been trickling back to me through child support, and she lost everything else. Her kids only saw her every other weekend and spent a couple of holidays with her. Paul dumped her, and he was no great catch anyways, since he was twice divorced with 5 kids and paying alimony and child support through the nose. I kept my kids, my house, my income, my retirement. I got Jen, and I'm genuinely happy. If that's not revenge, then I don't know what is. Comment, wow. Hope you had the patience to endure that. Cheating for 3.5 years? Personally, I don't know if I would have had the strength to do what you did, But it sounds like you're lucky that you did what you did, because if you had acted emotionally when you first found out, then your wife would probably have the house, the kids, and the alimony. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My crazy family forgot to invite me to my grandparents' funeral. They are convinced I was there and things took a turn for the worst. I'm 30Z and caused a major blow-up in my family, and now none of them are talking to me. For background, my hometown is tiny, 500 population, and when I went 2 hours away to the city, 15,000 population, for college, I loved it. I ended up staying after graduation, got married, and I'm happy here for a decade. I visit my hometown every few weeks or so, call/text my family near daily, and thought we were all good. My family's pretty small. Just my brother, mom, stepdad, dad, stepmom, and an aunt and uncle. Mom's siblings never married, no kids. My mother's grandparents moved to my hometown when I was in high school and were just down the street from us. My family has always been pretty drama-free aside from my parents' divorce when I was a kid, and we've been happy. The step-parents were blended in perfectly, and we share holidays and celebrations together. We're all super close and just the perfect little group. Ever since I moved away, the topic of when am I moving back is constant, and I've always laughed it off. My hometown has nothing. You have to drive 30 minutes for milk and bread, 60 to 90 minutes one-way commutes to work, and floods shut down the main road every Easter. I love the town, but I love here more. I have parks, stores, community events, a library. The city is great. My family grumbles that I need to move back, but I refuse. I've been trying to encourage them to come here, especially since it's not an hour drive to the nearest medical facility now. To the meat and potatoes. Both my grandparents passed over COVID times. They were both old, and their health had been failing for a while, so it was only a matter of time. Thankfully, they didn't catch it, but it made visiting them impossible, and we survived mostly through FaceTime. They both passed in their sleep months apart. Both were cremated and kept securely under the kitchen sink for safekeeping while the pandemic blew over. That was 2021. Well, I just found out my family held a funeral for them and scattered the ashes in my uncle's maple grove over the summer. No one said a word to me about it. I visited numerous times before and after, and not one word. I only found out because my great-uncle from California posted on Facebook a few weeks ago that he is entering hospice and was so thankful his health stayed strong enough for him to see his little sister, my grandma, to her final resting place. I was confused and called my mom. She was all, yeah, the funeral we had in July. Remember? Y'all, I visited them for the 4th of July. They did the funeral the 8th. Not a word about it to me. They had planned this for months. Long enough to arrange for my infirm great-uncle to be brought over from the other side of the country. Apparently, they talked about it all the time. Everyone is convinced I was at the funeral. They swear I was there. I can prove I wasn't because Google's got my location history. My hubby is baffled because he was supposedly there too, but he had to work every weekend in June and July. Time clock doesn't lie. My family straight up forgot about me. I'm hurt. I'm sad. And they're pissed at me for lying. They think I'm causing drama over nothing. Nothing I say can convince them I wasn't there. My family is united in this, and they've all put me on read until I admit I'm wrong. They think I've gone nuts. Either there's a doppelganger of me attending events, or my family doesn't want to admit they screwed up. I'm not backing down. Thanksgiving is coming up, and my family's been vague posting on Facebook about forgetful kids and mental health. It's so freaking weird. And I don't know if I'm in bizarro world or what's going on. My mom's best friend reached out and said I should just admit I was wrong and apologize that I'm causing my mom so much unnecessary stress. I asked her if she's checked everyone's home for CO2. She hung up on me. We checked our CO2, and our testers are running just fine. I have reached out to a few people in my hometown to check in on my folks, and they all say they're fine. I even spoke with the local volunteer firefighter group to see if they could check for gas leaks. Not sure if they were able to. I don't know what to do. I've shown them the proof I wasn't there, but they know I'm tech savvy and just assume I've photoshopped it. Hubby says we need a break, and we're going to be staying home this holiday season. Update 1. Not sure how to do updates on posts, so figured I'd post anything on my profile. Folks have private messaged me, and this will be easier. I think it's 11:27, and Thanksgiving just happened. Hubby and I stayed home. We got a small turkey and made our own little Thanksgiving. It was nice. We ate around noon, then watched a movie and later sat outside with a bottle of wine to watch the sunset behind the trees and neighbor houses. We usually take the day before off, drive to my folks, stay the night, and help with the Thanksgiving Day cooking. So it wasn't until Wednesday night that my mom broke the silence. Mom called and asked when I was showing up, and I told her we were staying home this year, but for them to have a happy Thanksgiving and to give the rest of the family my love. She was quiet for a long time after I said that, and I think she eventually mumbled an okay or something and hung up. It wasn't an angry hang up, just a hang up. On Thanksgiving Day, I sent a group Happy Thanksgiving gift to our family group chat. I received a few Happy Thanksgivings back. No one said anything else. There's been no posts on Facebook. Update 2. So I think I mentioned in one of my comments that my dad and I usually talk on the phone every Sunday morning. We're both early risers, so we chat over our morning coffees and watch the sunrise. Him and I haven't really spoken since this all went down, and it's been tough. I'm used to talking to him, you know. Well, I was sitting outside in my usual spot watching the sunrise and freezing my butt off, and he called me. I'm not entirely sure how to describe the emotions I felt. It was a mix of panic, hope, terror, happiness, and dread. I ended up answering because I just had to know what he wanted. It was an awkward conversation. He didn't address the current drama but instead tiptoed around the situation with all the grace of a cow on stilts. For instance, a simple, "How are you doing?" type question was answered with a "not good," and the whole conversation would stall out for a bit because he knew why I wasn't doing well. So we ended up talking about the weather, the various winter birds we'd seen in our feeders, and the Christmas decorations around town, things like that. Eventually, he asked if we were coming out for Christmas and sounded sad when I told him we weren't. He asked if him and stepmom could come visit us instead, and I told him it wasn't a good idea this year, that hubby and I were going to spend a quiet holiday together. I let him know he should be receiving some gifts at his P.O. box any day now, so to please pick them up from the post office and put them under the family tree for everyone. He said he'd ship ours to us as well, and that was pretty much it. No crazy drama to report. The only posts on Facebook have been the usual Christmas excitement ones. Countdowns, photos of Santa, silly gift ideas, photos of company Christmas parties. On a personal note, hubby and I are doing all right. Our health is good, our spirits high, and we're as solid as ever. We each got Christmas bonuses at our jobs, so we're excited about that. They're not large, but we're happy to have them. We have also done advent calendars for the first time ever. I got him a Lego one and he got me a hot chocolate one. We're gonna do the calendars again next year, maybe make a tradition out of it. Everyone please have a safe and happy holidays. Update 3. I've received a lot of messages and private DMs urging me to check into inheritance and such. I'm really touched. A lot of internet strangers are worried about me, and I wanted to ensure everyone that inheritance is most likely not an issue here. I'd almost be relieved if it was, because then it would at least make some sense. Money does weird things to people, you know. No one in my family is wealthy by any means. After my grandparents passed, their small estate was used to pay for their end-of-life expenses, and remaining assets split up. Everyone directly related got an equal split, so excluded my dad and the step-parents. I don't remember the exact amount I received, but it was around $5,000 if I recall. My brother gave me a share too, so I could finish paying off my college debt while the interest freeze was active. The great-uncle from California has kids and great-grandkids of his own and also isn't wealthy. I think one of his kids makes good money doing something in finance, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't imagine he left us anything as we hardly knew him. My mom, aunt, and uncle only met him a few times in their lives, and my brother and I even less. Grandma and him were close, but I don't think he liked my grandpa much. Update 4. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas. I've received a lot of support through my posts, and I'm really grateful. Writing these updates has had a therapeutic effect. Yesterday was Sunday, but I didn't answer my dad when he called. I just really didn't feel up to a pointless chat, so let it go to voicemail. He tried to reach me a few times throughout the day, but I didn't answer. Our bestie last minute invited us over to his house for Christmas Day lunch today, So husband and I were busy all Christmas Eve making cookies, peanut brittle, and homemade suckers/hard candies for his kids. Mom tried to reach out as well, but I also ignored her calls. We had a blast at lunch. Our friends' kids are a lot of fun to be around. They got some techie presents from their grandparents. Quest VR headset and Steam Decks. Lucky little rascals. Friend and his wife aren't good with tech, while hubby and I are, so we helped get them set up while our friend played a good host to his folks and in-laws. The grandparents didn't realize that a Steam Deck required a Steam account, so we got the kids all their own accounts set up, added them to our Steam friends lists, and gifted them some games. We also bought them a few VR games for their headset, and they were off to the races with Beat Saber in no time. As for my folks, my brother texted and asked if we could talk sometime tomorrow. I think me ignoring mom and dad has caused some kind of upset, which they deserve. Update 5. Spoke with my brother over the phone this morning. For starters, he apologized for everything. Him and I are good for now. For a bit of background, my brother and I are only 2 years apart. There weren't a lot of kids around growing up, so the two of us were often stuck doing stuff together, so we have a lot of shared interests and passions. He's been pretty silent on this whole matter, but still part of the group, if you know what I mean. I think the thought of losing him out of my life was probably the most painful because he's always been there. He was my rock until I met my husband. He's definitely a mama's boy though, so anything mom wanted, he made sure she got. I'm happy to have him back. Without further ado, here's the story from the horse's mouth. Mom apparently had a cancer scare late last year, which no one told me about. Go figure. And dad had a stint put in his heart back in January, which I did know about. This sense of mortality has apparently lit a fire under mom's ass to get me back home. But since I wasn't reacting to her passive-aggressive hinting, she and stepmom decided to go full crazy. My great-uncle's health was bad, and he'd been asking about funeral arrangements for his sister, my grandma, for a while, so the moms decided to plan it and used the event as a giant middle finger to me. They kept all the planning pretty hush-hush between the two of them, so no one on our side of the family actually knew about the funeral until like 2 weeks before. The mom said they'd invited hubby and I. No one thought anything about it. No one thought to mention, confirm, or check with me. The plan was to scatter the ashes, say a few words, and maybe head to town for lunch. It was a small affair. The moms didn't even tell the family that our great-uncle was coming for it. Like I said, it was a small thing, barely a footnote. No one thought it was odd because we're pretty chill people. 4th of July happens. Hubby and I are out. No one thought to mention it as we were all busy celebrating and having a great time. Any time the topic of this weekend would start, the conversation would be quickly shifted by one of the moms. We went back home. 8th of July happens. Great-uncle rolls into town with a few of his kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids, and it's a surprise to everyone but the moms. Everyone drives to the Maple Grove, and the moms have brought a ton of food and stuff. It's a full-blown party. No one on my side noticed I wasn't there because there were so many extra faces outside the usual group. They did the spreading of the ashes, they said their words, they ate, they had a great time. It wasn't until our great-uncle left and all his side left with him that they realized I wasn't there and hadn't been there. And this is where the crazy went up a notch. My brother says the moms were happy no one noticed I wasn't there and that this was proof to everyone that I needed to move back because I was so easily forgotten about. Because none of them thought to reach out, right? They basically did a ton of guilt-tripping manipulation and it made everyone upset at me for not showing up. Somehow it was my fault for being excluded. So suddenly, everyone was on their side with sticking it to me. But then a few months went by and tempers cooled, and then I guess the horror of it set in, followed by the shame. But by then, they were in too deep. How do you undo something like this? And since I hadn't brought it up, I guess they figured they would all just stay quiet about it and hope I never asked about a funeral. That's when I discovered the situation from my great-uncle's Facebook and called my mom, who panicked and went with the stupidest solution, claiming I was there. Don't I remember? I ended up talking with a few friends from high school mentioning the situation, and word got back to those in town. So suddenly, town gossip and little old church ladies got involved. Was I or wasn't I at the funeral? Did my family forget to invite me to the funeral of the only grandparents I'd ever know? Or am I just causing a ruckus? My brother said they all just went with mom's answer. Of course, they wouldn't forget me. Of course, I was there. Of course, they're good people and it just snowballed. The family expected me to eventually fold. I'm usually a non-confrontational person, so me sticking to my guns was unexpected. And then I missed Thanksgiving and now Christmas with no sign of backing down, and I guess the realization that I could just stop being part of their lives is setting in, and my parents are panicking. He's tried just getting them to apologize and explain, but stubbornness prevails. They want a rug sweep, but I'm not letting them. My brother is upset with everything that's happened. He's realized just how crappy it all has been, and he wants nothing to do with it anymore. But since he lives with my mom, he can't get away from it. He has asked if he can come stay with us for a little bit. I spoke with hubby, and he's in agreement with me that my brother can come crash in our spare bedroom for as long as he wants. Brother works remotely, so it's no trouble for him to pick up and go. I believe he's making the trip today or tomorrow. Not entirely sure, but I expect crap to hit the fan when he arrives. On a side note, hubby's stoked that my brother and I made up. The two usually game together but haven't due to the situation. He's downstairs right now setting up his man cave in preparation for my brother's arrival. I'm happy to see him so excited. Update 6. My brother rolled in late last night. He'd obviously been crying, and when I opened the door, he just held me and sobbed. I'd never seen him like that before, and soon both of us were just standing in the doorway crying into one another. He kept apologizing over and over again. Said he wasn't sure why he went with it, just kept saying sorry. Hubby got him all set up in the spare bedroom while brother and I talked. My brother's a wreck. He's always been a big guy, but he's lost a lot of weight, and his clothes just hang off him. If I didn't know better, I'd think he was on drugs. We talked for a little bit before bed, and he re-explained everything for my husband. I told hubby the story, but it was just so weird that hearing it again helped. This morning, my brother was up at dawn making some coffee and getting his workday going. Hubby's off all week. Lucky. So hubby made us working folks some pancakes and bacon. So far, everything's peaceful. We've decided not to answer any calls from our family. They've been made aware that he arrived safely and that we are going to spend the New Year's together, and that we're not answering any calls until January 1st. They may text if they wish. I'm sure they're losing their minds. Serves them right. Everyone have a safe and happy New Year's. Don't drink and drive. Update 7. I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable holidays, and may the new year be full of joy and happiness. Not too much of an update. Things here have been quiet. My brother's settled in nicely, and he's a great housemate. Our place isn't very big, but we have a full basement and a nice outside patio/porch area, so it doesn't feel crowded at all with the extra addition. He's a quiet and clean guy, no hassle at all. He got some fresh clothes from the Walmart, a haircut, and trimmed his beard so he's more presentable now. He's a lady killer when he gets cleaned up. He's made nice with a very nosy but kind retired couple next door and is adapting to city living nicely. Folks back home have been mostly well behaved. There's been a few texts back and forth as we're not answering calls. Mom mainly wants to know when brother's coming back, but he's keen on staying here for a while. Mom said I can't keep him, and I told her he's a grown-ass man and can do what he wants. Brother says he has her blocked after she ordered him to return home. Brother has tentatively asked if he could stay long-term, should he decide to, or at least longer than a usual visitor would stay, which we're fine with. He has a good-paying job and could afford an apartment, but he's never lived on his own, and I would guess he has some anxiety about it. Should that be the case, he'll start paying us some rent, and we'd probably adjust to give him the basement as his own space. Update 8. I had to change the locks. My brother is officially staying with us for the long haul. Hubby and him spent all Sunday organizing the basement and shifting things around, so he now has his own area to be comfortable in. He's pretty handy and has also started fixing little things around our house. Our windows and doors have never closed and lock/unlock smoother. He even fixed one of the closets we never use because we can never get the darn door open. Sadly, he also had to change the locks on our house and get us all new keys. This is because while hubby and I were out this Saturday, the mom showed up. They'd been calling and texting us all week, but we weren't really answering them. So I guess the two decided to drive over and hash it out in person. They have emergency keys to my place and just let themselves in. brother told them to leave. They argued, and my nosy but kind neighbors called the police when they noticed the commotion. So we get a call from the neighbor's wife, return home to some cops in our yard, all the neighbors out vacuuming their trees, and my nosy but kind neighbors standing on my porch with my brother behind them doing their best Gandalf, you shall not pass impression. Had to talk with the cops, explained that we were having a family dispute, and word vomited. I don't really remember what all I said and was shaking a lot. Our local cops are really great, fantastic guys and gals in blue, and took it all in stride. It's really cold here, so one had me join him in his cruiser with the heat on and gave me a bottle of water to calm down while we talked. They asked if we wanted the moms trespassed, but I wasn't sure if that counted as a criminal charge, so just asked the cops if they could just make them leave, which the cops did with no fuss. I think the moms were shocked we were taking this so seriously. They didn't fight or scream at us, just left quietly. My dad promised me he'd make sure his wife left us alone, or else he said he'd also have a stern talk with my mom. Him and I talked Sunday morning, and he seemed absolutely at the end of his rope. Husband jokingly told my dad he could move in too, to which he declined. Not sure where to go from here, but we're getting some Ring cameras installed once they arrive, and everyone but my dad is blocked. Hopefully they all just leave us alone. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comment section. Thank you and see you in the next video.